Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, David Carr, founder of your Steward Your Business, and having another fantastic guest with us this week. I'm super excited to get into our topic. Nikki Barua is here. She is the CEO and co-founder of Flipwork. We just had an amazing conversation right before we started this recording. So you guys are just going to get a load of great content and insights today. Really, the conversation here is going to be focused on reinvention. How do you look at yourself? How do you personally, organizationally, as a human being in the moments that we're really this threshold of technology? We're recording this at the beginning of 2026, January 2026. There's a lot of things that are at the precipice of, and I'm excited. Nikki, you mentioned the edge of the tsunami that's upon us. So number one, just thank you for coming and being here on the podcast with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, David. I'm so thrilled and excited about this conversation.
Yeah, you are a serial entrepreneur. You are an author, really a transformational leader, decades of leading large-scale change, working with Fortune 50, 500 companies. I mean, you have had just a great experience and a wealth of knowledge of now in agentic AI, reinvention, if you will. You just talked about launching Flipwork, another big initiative. I mean, you're just doing so many different things as an entrepreneur. I'm so excited for you to kind of share with us, bringing together leadership identity, human potential in the face of the AI change that is upon us.
That's right. It's what's exciting about this time is that we've never had something of this magnitude happen in modern human history. And you and I were just talking about, our birthdays and hitting this next decade of our life. And I'm just so thrilled that I'm still active in my career and participating at the forefront of so much change and helping companies and individuals make that leap. This is the time to be in the arena. This is not a time to be a bystander. So I'm just super excited. That's what has guided me throughout my career, is I just get excited about the future. And then I think about, what is the next version of me that needs to emerge? What skills, what mindset, what expertise do I need to build in order to contribute at the highest level and make the biggest difference in what's next?
Well, that's why we're here. And honestly, Nikki, the Business Roundtable Podcast is created as a space where we could share and encourage business owners, leaders, wherever they might be in their journey. Because I think you mentioned, like, I'm 52, we're this Gen X generation. And we're being challenged, I think, to look at things a little differently than we have in the past, like you said. And to your point, I think seeing the opportunity versus seeing what I could lose. And I think there's a lot of, I mentioned before we were recording this, at the end of 2025, I felt a lot of energy just kind of trying to hold still. And we can't hold still. There's a lot coming upon us. Talk to us a little bit about, like you said, you've been through a lot now. You're just turned 51 here, and now you're like, okay, I'm in the second half of life, and what does this look like as I'm going forward?
Yeah, Gen Xers, we're at an interesting stage because we're not the generation that's starting out their career with a whole new set of circumstances and environment and technology, nor are we our parents' generation that are done and they're not impacted. Gen Xers are the highest levels of their careers. We've built our careers based on what is called old power, where it was all about accumulation of knowledge and the corner offices and all of the status and everything that we gained. Because that, I think about, what is that movie, Wall Street, from back in I think it was
80s,
the Michael Douglas movie, right? And it was so much about that whole, the ambition and the drive and, the greed is good kind of conditioning in the early stages of our career that shaped so much of how Gen X leaders evolved. And, there's a fascinating book called New Power. It's by this author, Jeremy Hyman's. And what Jeremy talks about is that the difference between old power and new power is that old power is like currency. So you hoard it. You want more of it, and when you have it, you hold on to it. New power is like current, it flows, right? And it's democratized. Everybody has access to it, and more people that have access to it, the more it increases. And that's what AI has done. AI has shifted power from old power to new power. And what that means for Gen X leaders is that if you're still hoarding onto knowledge and status and the things that made you, gave you the power that you had, you're making yourself obsolete.
Mm.
Because in many ways, you're invisible because you're still holding on to it. You're not sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
New power is being able to share that knowledge, share that wisdom, give away your formula and your frameworks and all of that stuff. And, it's all about the collective success. And when you do that, that is what actually makes you more relevant today, because it's the era of democratization of infinite intelligence. And that is very uncomfortable for Gen Xers because it goes against how we were trained and what we learned in the workplace and our own conditioning. So to be able to unlearn that old way and actually embrace this new way, that is the reinvention that Gen X leaders just have to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so powerful, Nikki. I think I learned many years ago in my career that, to your point of, if you can empower other people and help them be more successful, it ultimately will help you. And I recognize that, even before AI, this truth that you're sharing, it's just AI thing is just making it even that much more evident that, it's not about what I possess. It's really, how do I, like you said, collectively help, and we all rise up and we all go further together. And I'm excited about this. I think it is, for those people that are kind of like you said, holding on, you are creating yourself, you're making yourself obsolete. And I think hopefully if people are listening to this, just do a self-assessment is, what is it that I let go of titles many years ago, Nikki, I don't know about you, because I felt like it was like, what did the business need? It wasn't, I wasn't the title, whatever it was, COO, vice president, director, whatever it didn't. It was like, I just needed to help people. And what does that need to look like, and let go of the titles. But I knew early on my career, I felt really, I held on to that was like defined me,
Yeah, it does. And the thing is, the more you hold on to things, the more invisible you also become, because you're the only one that knows that, right? It actually makes you invisible. And we are living in an era where leadership is about influence. And influence doesn't come from popularity or likes and comments and social media clout. It really comes from building trust. And that trust is built on your truth, your perspective, your unique wisdom that you're able to share. And that comes from the experience you've gained, the scars you've earned, all of those things. But you have to make that visible. And when you make it visible, that's where you gain relevancy. And it's a different approach, because in some ways people feel like, well, does that make every leader an influencer? It's not about that. It's about thought leadership and being able to, lead with something that goes beyond your technical expertise. And so often leaders think that what makes them valuable is their technical expertise, whether it's the engineering skills or the finance skills and things like that. You've accumulated that over a long period of time. So you take pride in that. You define yourself by that. But that's not enough. And especially when AI can probably, do that better than you can. The pure technical part, it's going to be able to do that better than you can. So what sets you apart, and how do you stand out in a world where everything starts to look more and more homogenous? Your taste is the only thing that's going to make you stand out.
So what I hear you saying, Nikki, is, we've put a lot of effort on getting these technical skills, but then, and I've seen this many times where they haven't built relational trust. I've seen this many times with systems and processes, and people are like, whoa, I'm not feeling seen. I'm not feeling, a part of this organization. I'm just, and I don't feel like you're actually looking out for me. And so everybody kind of goes into their corner. So what I hear you saying, and me personally, I feel like out there, because of the abuse of some of these things in the world of technology and other things, of like, there's a trust recession of like, how do I know who you really say you are, you or
Right.
your company, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Because look at the amount of AI slop online.
Mhm. Yeah.
From deep fakes to AI slop, like one of the things that I've been noticing is that even on social media posts, particularly on LinkedIn, I mean, people commenting on LinkedIn where that's not even an original comment. That
Mm.
was generated by ChatGPT and someone just copied and pasted that.
Mhm.
Every time you do something like that, you're actually eroding trust in your personal brand. And that's why, to me, originality is the new scarcity.
Mm.
So you have to recognize trust isn't going to be built by your base of knowledge or the depth of your expertise. Trust is going to be built by authenticity.
Mhm. How so and I agree. In your journey, Nikki, and because we were talking before we recorded this, we want to help people out there listening, practical things they can apply in themselves. How, with the people that you've worked with or in yourself, where you have been able to break down, I'll say maybe lies or mistruths about yourself, of like, that really isn't true. I got to get at to the real core and embrace it too. Sometimes
Yeah.
we don't want to embrace it, and it's like, oh, I got to be this, or I think I got to be that. I work with a lot of people that project who they think somebody's successful. Can you talk about maybe your personal journey, or just because I feel like others have to hear this, because sometimes they're like, well, I don't know, I don't know how to do this, I haven't
Yeah.
done it before,
Yeah, I mean, I can share in the context of my own evolution over time. I started my career in business strategy, and that's
Mhm.
post business school. I got into corporate strategy and business strategy, and really advising the world's largest companies and their boards on how to grow their businesses and how to dominate their markets and all of that. And my identity was very much defined by my strategy skills because I took pride
Mhm.
in it. It's not a common skill, especially
Mhm.
elite corporate strategy. It's a rare skill, and I'm really really good at it. So when you have this rare ability, it quickly becomes your entire identity. So to me,
Mm.
I'm a strategist. That's what I do. That's what companies pay me for. But when you break down what strategy is, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of analysis, it's a lot of sort of pattern recognition, right? And then it's building the sort of the story around the case for making that change. Now,
Mhm.
if you break down every single piece of that, guess what? Is AI going to be, if I'm competing with AI on research, who's going to win? AI.
Mm.
If I'm
Mhm.
competing with AI on analysis based on that research, AI is going to win. If I'm competing with AI on, pattern recognition, AI is going to win. If I'm competing with AI on making a logical argument based on that, AI is going to win.
Mhm.
Every single thing. And today you have tools that even build great PowerPoint presentations with the
Yeah.
strategic recommendations that they can do it in an instant, whereas it might take me days to do it, right?
Mhm.
Every single piece of what I built my identity with, if I'd held on to that, I'd be completely obsolete and replaced by a machine.
Mm.
What I learned to see over time was recognizing that, yes, that's part of my core technical ability, but what really sets me apart from other strategists, other leaders, and other advisors is my ability to influence. Because a deck is worthless if your clients aren't willing to implement it. And they're not going to implement it because the size of the font or the colors of the slides. They're going to implement it because you've convinced them and influenced them to adopt that. And that's
Mm.
what I discovered my real skill was. That led to a reinvention in my career of going from pure strategy work to actually, leading sales and growing businesses and to becoming an entrepreneur and building businesses from the ground up to very large sizes. Each of those successes really stem from the ability to move people to action.
Mhm.
You recognize that for me, it was a recognition of that my real zone of genius is actually my ability to move people to action, not my ability to do great research or analysis and all of that. But in order to move people to action, how do I leverage AI as my partner, as my thought partner, as my coworker in that, so that I can get even better strategies faster. And then I leverage what only I can do, which is the ability to influence action
Mhm.
and evolve that way. So what that has taught me through every stage of my career, whether it was my corporate career or my entrepreneurial ventures, is that you got to get down to the essence of what makes you uniquely you. Once
Mhm.
you understand that, look at every single part of what you do that you can now leverage AI to do, rather than hold on to that. And that's not an easy thing, by the way. Even for me, I took so much pride in my actual strategy work that
Yes.
sharing that to say, oh, I'm not going to do it personally, right? It's sort of letting go of your baby, the things that defined you. And that's where identity gets in the way, because we hold on to a definition of ourselves rather than being willing to unlearn, let go, and look at where do you create the highest value going forward.
Yeah, I love thank you so much for breaking that down, Nikki, because I hope as folks, listeners are taking this in, you can do the same thing. Um, I for me, similar path, Nikki, of like understanding as a scientist, biologist background, I recognize that. But what I read the book Start With Why years ago by Simon Sinek, which was really help give me some language and understanding in my brain how to articulate what you just said. You're influencing people to take action do something with this all this strategy, all this research that you've been able to do. That actually, that's all great, but then actually to move them, that's amazing and powerful. And I can totally sense that, Nikki, when you're in the room and it's like, look, I'm going to help you. You have to make the decision, but I'm going to help show,
Mhm.
and this is why you've got to make a decision. For me, it was understanding where I'm a connector and bringing people together
Mhm.
and understanding and that's why I do the podcast and other things, and recognizing then also when it's to get out of the way and it's like I've done what I'm supposed to do and I'm to
Mhm.
bring people together, whatever the capacity that might be, whether it's a project, whether it's a fundraising effort, or whatever the effort, that initiative might be. And I think it was liberating, and also to your point, I stopped feeling guilty for things I felt like I had to be.
Yeah.
That and like you said, I started to let that go. And even when people would call me out, like, well, you should be doing all this other part in implementation and the details, and I realized I could do it, but I wasn't as, like you said, as effective and
Mhm.
honestly as influential, because
Yeah.
there's people that could do it better than me, and AI can do it better than me on some other things. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that that point of embracing, like you said, who you are and the influence, but also letting go of those other things. It's kind of a shedding. It's both embracing and letting go at the same
Mhm.
time.
Well, you can't embrace things unless you empty your cup first, right?
Mm,
And you create. If you look at where most people, spend their time on any given day or given week, chances are 80% of our capacity is used up for things that are not the highest use of our time and talent.
yeah.
If you could put 100% of your time, focus, effort, energy into the thing that makes you you, that is your superpower, that's your gift,
Mhm.
imagine what would be possible. Now, there's practical reasons why we can't do that, because other jobs need to be done. Somebody has to check email, make the phone calls, do this or that. Um, but going through that thought experiment of saying, what would that look like if I could reallocate my, capacity from low value tasks to my total zone of genius? What would that
Mhm.
look like? Because it's that truth is very confronting, because it forces you to ask that question of, really, what is it about you, right? For some people it might be your gift is making the complex simple. For some
Mhm.
people it could be being a connector and earning trust and building relationships. Whatever that is, it helps you really nail it down into the essence of your humanity, as opposed to the titles, the status, the labels we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
And from that place of truth is where you can start to redesign and reinvent, and really look at not just in terms of delegation to other people, but delegation to AI, partnering
Mhm.
with AI and thinking about, how do humans and machines collaborate? And that is what agentic human reinvention is about. That's literally what it is about, is how do you do the things that only you can do, not just other machines, but other humans cannot do it, only you can do. And then how do you now partner with machines to do every other part? And when you do that, not only do you become exponentially capable, but you unlock something that is truly your highest potential.
Yeah. And that's exciting. That to me is so exciting, Nikki, because as we were talking earlier too, and before we recorded, about the gap and the gain and seeing what the potential is. Yeah, I think I want you to restate, because we didn't, we weren't recording at the point, but I want people to hear loud and clear the opportunity for wealth creation and growth in this point in the world. Because you've seen the big companies, you've seen the big boys at play, but you're saying, if you're a solopreneur or just starting out a small business, speak to me about, because I want everyone to hear the possibilities out there. Because I think you are a visionary in that way, and you see what could be.
Yeah. Look, I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 20 years. And when I think about what it took to start a business from the ground up back then, and how much risk you take, how much startup capital you invest on your own, especially if you're bootstrapping, and the number of hours you work and the lack of resources that you're constantly battling against, it was really hard to start a business, let alone grow and scale your business. That is the constraint that AI is removing today. And it's such an exciting time, because you think about today, and especially now, like I'm, in building Flipwork, for example, like this is so different. The experience was so different from starting up previous businesses over the last 10, 20 years. This was the first time I was able to build something without needing to hire 20 people on day one. Every single aspect of the business, whether it was legal or finance or operations or product development, every single aspect, I had more leverage and free resources than I've ever had in the past. Not only does that allow you to achieve things at lower expenses, but it allows you to ship faster, grow faster, and reach a bigger market at a speed and scale you could have never done before. What AI represents for me is the democratization of infinite intelligence. We now all have the power to achieve things we could never do before. And the wealth creation that is possible as a result of that is something that never existed in modern human history. Rather than people putting their energy, and even business owners and entrepreneurs focusing on how is this going to displace me or disrupt my business or destroy what I've built, stop worrying about the downside. Yes, you need to be cognizant of that and paranoid about how to protect your business, but more importantly, get excited about the upside. Think about the massive potential. This is today, a solopreneur could build a multi-million-dollar business in 12 months. You could never do that before, right? You have all of the strategies available, all of the capabilities available. Every single AI agent is like hiring another, having headcount added to your business without actually needing to make payroll. that is incredible resource capacity at your disposal. The only thing standing in your way is whether you lead from a place of excitement and optimism of the future, or you're letting fear dictate whether you take that risk and start reinventing yourself and your business.
Yeah. And I think, don't let the fear, all of us have that. There's, I know you wrote this in your, you've talked about this in the past about courage, and how do we take, as I was reading some of your posts, and I know your book Beyond Barriers, among other things, but like challenging yourself to have courage is not the absence of fear, right?
Yeah.
It's going and saying, hey, I'm going to go in. The fear is there. I'm moving forward. I see something much better. I think we as a world need to renew our minds and to think what could be versus all the things that are bad and not working. And of course, if you're going to look for problems, you're going to find them. That's not an issue. But to your point, Nikki, I think seeing what could be, and we need more voices like yours in the world, and others that share this, kind of pass this light on, if you will, of like encouraging. And it does not just you as an entrepreneur, because it affects your team, your people that you're entrusted on, because they in the culture that you're creating. Do we create a culture of innovation? I mentioned to you before we recorded, I was at the Society for American Military Engineers Federal Small Business Conference in November. What I heard from all the Department of Defenses is like, we're lagging. They're lagging in innovation. They're lagging behind because of, hey, we're not innovating. We're not taking risks. And it has to be shared risks. It doesn't have to be just the military. It doesn't have to be just the the contractor that's doing this work. But we have to come and see what's possible. And we're not always going to get it right. But to what you're saying, what can be, and move in that direction. And I think to your point too, with the wealth creation, I think we were talking about this before we recorded the podcast in our last meeting, but I think for wealth creation and the value that you create, the desired outcome, I think it's an exciting time because we're no longer, I hope, we're going to move away from trading time for money. Of like, if I create value and a desired outcome, and you get this, like you said, then you could make a business that is making millions. To me, that's super exciting.
It is. And we are for the first time able to do things that truly make work meaningful. Right? It's work is no longer about just effort and hours and the grunt work and the necessary pain you have to absorb just to get through your day, but it can actually leverage the best of who we are and apply it in meaningful ways. The challenge, however, that everybody has to really consider is you can get to that promised land. You cannot get to that future unless you're willing to have some deep examination of yourself, your business, your own workflows, all of that, and recognize that there are no sacred cows. Like, you've got to be willing to let go. And that's not an easy thing, because it goes against our biological instincts of how we're wired, right? We're wired for that certainty and that comfort, and that what we know is what we hold on to, because it's the formula for success. You know that every day, if you show up at work and do XYZ things for your business, in the past, it has worked and it has led you to business success. You can land those clients, you can do the work, you can hire the people and all of that stuff. Well, suddenly, if you had to just stop doing all those things, that's scary, because that's uncertainty that we're not built for.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's exactly the exercise you have to go through, is to let go of all of those things and actually imagine, because this future is not just coming, it's already here, where today AI is focused more on driving efficiencies and automating things so it's faster, better, more cost effective. But very quickly, it's going to go into spaces where it can do many of the things that only humans can do today, whether it is making decisions, whether it is applying judgment and wisdom, and it can scale that. So the question is, if that's going to happen anyway, do you want to wait for that to happen and then, prepare yourself? Or do you want to prepare yourself today and actually look at it from a positive lens to say, I now have a blank canvas to be anyone I choose to be. I now have a blank canvas to build my business to be, or pivot my business to be anything it can be. But what decision will you make about it? That is the behavioral aspect really comes down to that, is, are you willing to examine that hard truth? And are you willing to go into uncertainty and the unknown with optimism and with that creativity and imagination of what you can create in the future?
Man, Nikki, you're dropping a bomb there in a good way. And I would say, as you're saying that, in my mind, I'm thinking, this is not a one-time deal. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to do this and then move forward. It's like you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable regularly.
Constantly. Yeah, because the speed and scale of change is only going to get faster. Right? So this is not about, oh, let me kind of go through this exercise one time and then I'm set for the next decade. No, by the time you master one change, 10 other things are going to change. So really, the meta skill that you have to master is your ability to constantly reinvent. And reinvention, unlike skill building or is not incremental. If you're doing things that are incremental, you're competing against a machine that is exponential, and you will lose in that battle. So you have to think about, what exponential leap of faith are you willing to make, and how do you do it not just once but over and over and over again?
Oh, that is profound, I think, Nikki. And to think thinking in quantum terms of 10x. There's a book 10x is easier than 2x of thinking of like training your brain, because like you said, our generation and before is kind of more incremental, and now that the speed it's going, companies could last for a while. I mentioned to you before we recorded the podcast How the Mighty Would Fall by Jim Collins, and he talked about big companies like Kodak or Circuit City or other ones, and they didn't pivot, and this would be way before AI.
Yeah.
And thinking, oh well, we're this and we're not thinking this. And to me, if it just shows, like, to your point, we need to continually create a space. And
part of it, David, though, is even the examples that you shared. When you think incrementally, you don't discover the massive opportunities from that.
Yeah.
We were talking about the dot-com boom earlier. Like, if all companies did was simply build a website and slapped on a .com to their brand name, that's incremental. Maybe they're now visible online, but true transformation, even back then, was the result of reimagining the entire business. What your business strategy is, what your capabilities are, how do you build a supply chain around that? How do you market differently? How do you capture customer data? Every single piece of how you used to do things versus how you need to be doing things had to be completely reimagined. And that's an exponential shift. That wasn't incremental. That wasn't just taking brick and mortar and just saying, okay, how can we make this slightly better online? And the companies that dominated versus the companies that got completely decimated during that time were the ones, the difference was incremental versus exponential. We're looking at the same kind of thing, except unlike the internet transition, this is happening in weeks. You don't have the luxury of months and years to get your head around this kind of disruption and prepare yourself or prepare your business for it. So if you're still waiting to take action because you don't have enough certainty or clarity on what you're supposed to do, you are actively getting left behind. You are ensuring that your business fails simply because you're stuck in inertia and doing nothing about it.
I know we're getting close to the end of the podcast, and I want to keep going because there's so many great things that you're covering, Nikki. But one way I've been trained to do this in my coaching program in ways of, I call it the impossible game of, like, when we're setting goals, it's like, what is kind of realistic, which is that incremental, and thinking through, okay, this is realistic. What would be, and I'm just using this term's radical. So what's a 3 or 4 times, whatever that would be, and then something impossible, like a 10x, right? So stair stepping it, if you will, because I think sometimes that's really hard to people. Let's just say you have a $5,000 mortgage or $10,000 mortgage, right? And they say, well, what if you had a $100,000 mortgage? It's very hard in our minds to go from a $10,000 mortgage month to a $100,000 month. Just, and to your point, if you don't know who you truly are, what am I building? What's my foundation on? Can you speak to a little bit of that process?
Yeah. Well, step one is really, if you are a leader, a business owner, the first thing you want to start with is not the baseline of where you're at, because that's where we get stuck in present day thinking. And like you said, it's literally impossible for the human brain to go from like 1x to 1,000x gain. We just can't cross that chasm. So instead of doing that, go the reverse. And this is exactly what we do with large companies as well, is imagine a future where you have zero resource constraints. Imagine if you have a 10 or 20 person team, imagine if you had 1,000 people in your company. Imagine if you had unlimited budget, and imagine if you had every resource available. What is the problem you're excited about solving? What is the capability that you have honed, either individually or as a team, that you can, bring to the table? What is the category you want to conquer? Think light years ahead in a different span, because you're sort of zooming out of present day into something that by definition is exponential, the zero resource constraints. And when you start to think about that, to say, yes, that would be an exciting problem, right? That is the space I want to be in. When you lock into that painted picture of the future, Now you zoom back in to say, okay, where can AI help me individually or my team collectively and allow us to get to that future and build to that?
Mhm.
By having that clarity of that future vision, it not only brings in optimism and excitement about the future, but it also helps you take those baby steps going from where you are to where you want to be step by step. Because you're not going to do that, 1 to 1000x overnight. And it's not going to
Mhm.
be one straight linear leap, going from that place. It will be in iterations. With big companies, we do this in 90-day sprints. And our goal throughout the sprints that we do isn't about solving a specific problem. Our real goal is about unleashing momentum. Because
Mm.
when people start to see, wow, we had this vision and look at the progress we've made in just 90 days. Look at how we've reinvented our work, or we've released 40% of our capacity that can now be redeployed into some new project. We're able to double our client work without adding one extra headcount. We're able to do work so much faster, and we can respond to 50 RFPs in less time. All of those things, when they start to happen, it starts to build collective confidence, but it also unlocks innovation in a whole different way, because people start to see what is actually possible. And when you keep compounding that over and over again in 90-day cycles, that is what turns a company from being a legacy model to a reinvented exponential AI agentic enterprise. And
Mm.
for any business owner, whether you're a solopreneur or you're a small team, the same exact model can apply. Get clarity on what it is that you have a vision for building, what problem space do you want to be in the future. But this also helps you identify where the risks in your business might be. Right?
Mm.
If you have a small business that is at a risk of being replaced, or certainly there's going to be price pressure. Let's say you have a bookkeeping company. Well, there's going to be a lot of price pressure if that's all you do.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so you got to think about, well, what business do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years from now? What is it that will keep us still valuable and maintain the kind of value that we provide to our clients and to our marketplace? It gives you the path to go from being completely replaced by AI into reinventing something that AI cannot replace.
Mhm. Wow, Nikki, you've shared so much wisdom with us today, and I so appreciate you taking the time to let our listeners kind of maybe open up their mind to things that they hadn't considered. And I hope that as you guys are listening in, please do connect with Nikki, follow along. She's on LinkedIn, and you can see all the amazing things she's up to. Um, but since we covered so much ground, and even just the last part that you just shared was really powerful, Nikki. But if there was anything, I want to give you the opportunity. If there's anything else that I didn't ask you, or I might have missed, or you just want to really empower our listeners to take action on as we wrap up this episode, what would that be? To share your words of wisdom with them.
Stop waiting. Stop waiting for certainty. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. It's never happening again, because we are now entering an era where uncertainty is the only thing, and change is the only thing that will be the constant. And so the best way to dive in is learn. You're not going to master anything if you don't actually roll up your sleeves and dive into it. And that's one of the reasons why I share so much content. And if your
Mhm.
listeners are interested, I share a weekly newsletter that gives actionable strategies to leaders to figure out, how they can not only reinvent themselves, but reinvent the businesses. That's the key, is just be curious, dive into it, stop waiting.
I love it, Nikki. Thank you so much for being here. We love having you here. We'd love to have you come back again sometime. Real pleasure having you here.
Thank you for inviting me, David. I'm thrilled.
Absolutely. Of course, we love it when you guys like and subscribe and follow along. Leave any comments you have to make sure we can get them. And come along our next journey, our next episode. Until then, be well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.